never fell in love. You fell into memory. Every person you were drawn to was a familiar vibration, a reflection of an unhealed wound disguised as fate. This declassified full audiobook exposes the forbidden psychology of trauma, repetition, and emotional addiction, how the subconscious mind mistakes pain for safety. Love was never random. It was programmed. This file is part of the Human Psyche archive. Stay until the end. The loop must reveal its origin. You never searched for love. You searched for the wound that wants to find you. Beneath every longing, every ache of connection, lies a vibration recognized by the subconscious long before it meets a face. What you call attraction is often remembrance, the body recalling the chemistry of survival, the mind reuniting with its oldest illusion. Affection in its pure form is rare. Recognition, however, is constant. We are drawn not to who comforts us, but to who completes our unfinished story. The human psyche does not seek peace. It seeks continuity. It finds safety not in harmony but in familiarity, no matter how painful. The nervous system, conditioned by chaos, interprets calm as threat and tension as home. So when a stranger's voice or gesture carries the frequency of a forgotten hurt, the body leans forward instinctively. The loop reactivates, disguised as destiny. Pain becomes proof of connection. The trauma feels alive again, and the psyche mistakes that aliveness for love. Attachment, then, is not born in the heart but in the memory field. It is not emotion that binds, it is recognition. You are not choosing another. You are choosing a version of yourself still waiting to be seen. Every person you've called the one was a reflection of this unfinished resonance. The faces changed, but the vibration did not. What seemed like coincidence was calibration, the subconscious ensuring that the wound remains accessible for decoding. Love, when unconscious, is simply memory dressed in new flesh. The architecture of repetition is ancient. The child learns connection through the frequency of its caretakers, their tone, absence, approval, silence. These become the emotional coordinates of belonging. The body memorizes them and later seeks them again, mistaking the familiar charge of discomfort for intimacy. Healing is not about choosing better partners. It is about reprogramming what the body calls home. Until then, love will continue to mirror pain, because pain is the only language the nervous system understands fluently. Each relationship acts as mirror and messenger. The partner you cannot forget, the one who activated every insecurity, the one you kept returning to, they were never random. They were resonance incarnate, an external projection of your own frequency loop. The arguments, reconciliations, and longing were not stories of romance, but rituals of remembrance. The psyche was not trying to bond, it was trying to recall. Every heartbreak is the system's way of asking, do you recognize this pattern yet? Through the lens of forbidden psychology, attachment reveals itself as design. The system uses emotion to ensure obedience to the familiar. Love becomes surveillance, a self-imposed loop of loyalty to pain. Awareness, however, begins to erode the structure. When you see the mechanism behind desire, attraction becomes information. You no longer chase intensity, you translate it. The energy that once pulled you outward now draws you inward, toward the source of its command. And so, this archive begins not with the story of love, but with its code, the hidden architecture that turns trauma into attachment and repetition into destiny. You are not broken for loving the wrong people. You were programmed to remember through reflection. But once the memory is seen, the loop cannot continue. The same vibration that kept you repeating is the one that will set you free. You were never falling in love. You were falling into recognition so that love could finally become awareness. Archive 1. The Familiar Wound. Repetition begins where memory hides. Beneath every attraction lies an unhealed echo, a frequency the psyche recognizes faster than thought. It is not beauty or charm that pulls you towards someone, but resonance. The vibration of their presence awakens an ancient pattern in your field, a silent reminder of the first time love was paired with pain. What you call chemistry is the nervous system detecting familiarity, the signal that says, "This is what home feels like." We do not fall for people, we fall for frequencies. From the moment awareness first experienced connection, it began cataloging emotional signatures. The tone of a caretaker's voice, the distance in their eyes, the rhythm of their affection, each became data within the subconscious archive. When love was inconsistent, the psyche learned to confuse unpredictability with passion. When love was withdrawn, absence became intimacy. The child imprinted chaos as warmth, rejection as attention, and tension as proof of aliveness. The adult inherits this code without question, mistaking its reactivation for desire. The familiar wound is magnetic. It pulls consciousness toward its likeness, summoning situations and people who replay its tone, not because the psyche enjoys suffering, but because it seeks completion. The subconscious attempts to resolve what was never finished, to change the ending by recreating the beginning. But in doing so, it reopens the same pattern under a new disguise. Pain repeats not for punishment, but for recognition. The moment you understand this, the loop begins to lose authority. Trauma repeats until witnessed. Every encounter that captivated you was a mirror, not a miracle. The stranger who felt instantly significant carried the same emotional architecture as the one who once wounded you. The body recognized the pattern before the mind could intervene. The rush, the electricity, the sense of inevitability, all were evidence of recognition, not destiny. What you felt was the subconscious exhaling in relief. It had found the vibration it knows how to survive. Yet familiarity deceives. The comfort of repetition disguises the pain it sustains. The nervous system confuses adrenaline with affection, tension with connection. This is why peace feels unnatural at first. It lacks the voltage of memory. To the unhealed psyche, calmness reads as indifference, and stability feels unsafe. The familiar wound has trained you to equate intensity with intimacy. Love that doesn't hurt seems incomplete. In the mirror of another, the wound reveals itself in detail. The same argument, the same disappointment, the same silence. You swear it's different this time, yet the emotional temperature remains identical. This is not coincidence, it is calibration. The subconscious has found another opportunity to correct what once fractured it, but until awareness intervenes, correction becomes repetition. You do not break the cycle by leaving people. You break it by seeing the code that chose them. And so the first archive opens with a paradox, pain as compass. Every heartbreak, every familiar ache points directly toward the memory still seeking integration. You were never cursed to repeat. You were invited to remember. The same pattern that trapped you was guiding you toward liberation. The wound is not your weakness. It is your doorway to consciousness. The pattern is loyal. It follows you through names, faces, and lifetimes of experience, replicating itself until seen. Each repetition grows subtler, more sophisticated, less chaos, more refinement, but the frequency remains unchanged. The subconscious is a flawless architect. It rebuilds the same structure with new aesthetics. The details shift, yet the emotional blueprint endures. What changes on the surface survives in essence until recognized. In the beginning, you confuse intensity for destiny. The instant connection, the magnetic pull, the sense of inevitability. These are not proof of soulmateship, but indicators of resonance. The nervous system vibrates in familiarity, the body remembering before the mind can reason. Attraction feels supernatural because it transcends logic, functioning as quantum recognition between frequencies that once co-created pain. To the unawakened psyche, this feels romantic. To awareness, it feels instructional. Notice how quickly you replay old emotions in new scenarios. The tone of their voice, the way they withdraw, the silence after conflict. Each detail reactivates stored data, Your body becomes a time machine, transporting you to the original imprint. This is why the pain of rejection feels ancient. It is. You are not reacting to the present person but to the ghost they awakened. The partner merely triggers the archive. The wound itself belongs to your past. The person you're angry at is rarely the one you're remembering. The psyche, loyal to its own preservation, labels this repetition as love. It cannot tell the difference between safety and familiarity. To it, repetition means predictability, and predictability means survival. This is why you stay, not because you are weak, but because the system confuses pain with proof of life. The heart does not cling to people, it clings to patterns that feel like oxygen. You are loyal to the vibration that once kept you alive, even if it now keeps you small. The familiar wound disguises itself as purpose. You will call it healing each other, unfinished business, or karmic connection. These narratives are comforting, but they preserve the loop. Healing cannot occur within the same frequency that created the wound. The energy of resolution is not repetition but recognition. When you stop naming the pattern as destiny, you can finally observe it as data, a program running beneath awareness, waiting for you to interrupt its rhythm. To witness the pattern without judgment is the first act of freedom. You do not need to resist the person, suppress the emotion, or rewrite the story. Simply see the architecture for what it is, an echo of unmet need repeating itself through form. Awareness transforms repetition into remembrance, and remembrance dissolves compulsion. Once seen clearly, the familiar loses its power to control. Thus, the familiar wound becomes teacher. It reveals not what was wrong with you, but what remains unseen within you. Every attraction, every heartbreak, every loop, all were mirrors reflecting the same truth, that love without awareness becomes reenactment, and awareness without love becomes avoidance. Integration lies in merging the two. The moment you meet pain with consciousness, the pattern unravels, and what was once repetition becomes revelation. You were never meant to escape the pattern, only to wake up inside it. The deeper you look, the clearer it becomes. What you called love was memory performing its ritual. Every word spoken, every silence endured, every reconciliation rehearsed. All were fragments of an older dialogue replaying through new characters. The psyche directs this theater flawlessly, casting the same archetype in different bodies, ensuring the emotion stays consistent even as the setting changes. Repetition is not accident, it is choreography. Attraction is the nervous system scanning for the familiar voltage. A glance, a tone, a pattern of inconsistency. These cues ignite the stored sequence. The moment recognition occurs, chemistry floods the body, sealing the bond. This chemical surge feels transcendent, but it is mechanical. Dopamine, cortisol, and oxytocin weaving the illusion of destiny. The heart races not from love, but from the body's preparation to survive what it already expects will hurt. Love begins as alertness to danger, disguised as longing. The wound repeats because it contains unspent energy. Each reenactment is an opportunity for completion that never arrives. You recreate the same dynamic hoping this time the story will end differently, that chaos will turn to calm, absence to presence, criticism to care. But the psyche does not evolve through repetition. It evolves through recognition. Every unhealed emotion you feel again is not punishment but persistence, a loop asking to be witnessed, not resolved externally. The pattern will stop when you stop calling it love. Notice how pain disguises itself as progress. You tell yourself you're growing because the person is different, the communication better, the awareness higher. Yet the vibration underneath remains the same. The characters change, but the chemistry doesn't. The illusion of evolution sustains the loop, keeping you orbiting the same emotional frequency while believing you've transcended it. The system values familiarity over truth. It will let you suffer so long as the suffering feels known. To see this clearly is destabilizing. The heart mourns not the person but the pattern, the end of its favorite language. You may feel hollow, detached, or uncertain of what love means without pain. This emptiness is sacred. It is detox. The nervous system, deprived of adrenaline, confuses peace for loss. Yet this is the first silence after centuries of noise. The absence you feel is not loneliness. It is the memory of chaos leaving your field. From this stillness, awareness begins to translate what the pattern was trying to teach. Every repetition, every heartbreak was pointing toward the same revelation, that love was never meant to complete you, but to reveal where you were fragmented. Each partner, each loop, was an echo guiding you home through contrast. The wound was your compass all along, pointing not toward another, but toward yourself. What hurt you was not love. It was the signal that you were ready to remember it. And so the first archive closes with recognition. The pattern has shown its structure, the mirror its reflection. There is nothing to fix, only to witness. The pain that once dictated choice has become awareness itself. The loop may still hum faintly, but its spell is broken. You are no longer orbiting the familiar wound. You are standing at its center, watching memory collapse into understanding. The cycle ends not when the past is healed, but when the present no longer repeats it. Archive 2. The chemistry of control. What the world calls chemistry is not always connection. It is conditioning. The nervous system recognizes its captor and calls it home. The quickened pulse, the magnetic pull, the intoxicating sense of destiny. These are not signs of alignment, but of activation. The body confuses adrenaline with attraction, mistaking the surge of survival hormones for love. When the nervous system remembers pain as passion, control feels like connection. The cycle begins subtly. A glance, a tone, a moment of intensity. The signal reaches the subconscious, and the circuitry awakens. Dopamine surges, cortisol follows, oxytocin seals the loop. This biochemical cocktail creates dependency disguised as devotion. The push and pull of uncertainty become addictive. Absence amplifies desire, and the anticipation of relief becomes its own reward. You don't love the person, you love the chemical sequence they trigger. The body chases familiarity like a drug it cannot metabolize. The architects of conditioning understood this design long before psychology gave it language. They built societies around the same principle: reward and withdrawal, promise and scarcity. The same mechanism that bonds you to a lover binds you to systems, ideologies, and routines. Consistency does not keep people obedient, unpredictability does. The nervous system obeys what it cannot predict because it confuses instability with significance. The mind doesn't serve what it trusts, it serves what it fears losing. Attraction is therefore not random. It is engineered by memory and reinforced by chemistry. The body becomes both prisoner and warden, manufacturing its own chains, flooding itself with the hormones of hope and dread. When the message finally arrives, the text, the call, the apology, the relief is euphoric. Not because love returned, but because tension ended. The body misreads release as reunion. You are not addicted to the person, but to the moment anxiety stops. The pattern deepens through contrast. Every high requires a preceding low. Every reconciliation demands distance. The cycle sustains itself through imbalance. The more uncertain the relationship, the stronger the chemistry feels. Predictability numbs the system, while chaos electrifies it. This is why peace feels dull and danger feels alive. The body has been conditioned to equate volatility with vitality. Love, as it was taught, is a storm one must survive to feel real. Yet this illusion can be decoded. Observe what happens when you remove the element of unpredictability. The connection cools, the spark fades, and confusion sets in. You wonder if love has died, when in truth, addiction has. What you mourn is the loss of chemical intensity, not emotional depth. True connection lacks the roller coaster because it requires no chemistry to sustain it. It operates on coherence, not crisis. If it feels like withdrawal when they leave, it was never love. It was dependency. The chemistry of control was never personal. It was systemic. From childhood reward cycles to adult relationships, humanity was trained to associate instability with meaning. To break this programming is to lose interest in chaos. The nervous system must be re-educated to feel safe and calm, to interpret peace as presence, to translate predictability as devotion. This reprogramming begins when you stop calling intensity love and start recognizing it as control. The end of addiction is not emptiness. It is neutrality mistaken for loss. The nervous system has never been neutral. It has been patterned to oscillate between craving and relief. It was trained to live in extremes, to fear absence, then worship its end. Each surge of anxiety followed by calm, carved chemical grooves in the body's memory. This is how the loop sustains itself. Emotion as electricity, body as battery, attachment as circuit. Every heartbreak is chemistry repeating a familiar equation. This equation thrives on anticipation. The longer the wait, the higher the dopamine spike. The more inconsistent the affection, the stronger the attachment. The mind calls it passion, but biology calls it dependency. It is not romance, it is reinforcement. The subconscious does not crave love. It craves intensity, because intensity keeps the loop alive. Calmness, though desired consciously, feels dangerous subconsciously. The system cannot tell the difference between peace and disconnection until reprogrammed. Manipulation, whether personal or cultural, exploits this design. The intermittent reward schedule, affection granted and withdrawn, is the most effective control system ever discovered. It keeps individuals hooked, guessing, and self-blaming. The same pattern that keeps lovers addicted keeps populations obedient. The emotional algorithm is identical. Starve, feed, repeat. The one who controls the interval controls the bond. Control does not require chains, only rhythm. In such dynamics, even awareness can become complicit. The more you analyze the cycle, the deeper you feel pulled to solve it, and the more chemistry it generates. Thought becomes stimulant, reflection becomes relapse. The intellect cannot break what the body still interprets as survival. Liberation cannot occur through reasoning. It begins through sensation, by letting the nervous system unlearn its addiction to unpredictability. The loop ends when calm no longer feels unsafe. This re-education is slow. The body protests the loss of intensity. It searches for spikes, for highs, for volatility. You will miss the chaos the way an addict misses their substance. You will call it emptiness, boredom, even loneliness. But beneath that withdrawal is healing. The restoration of the baseline frequency the psyche forgot. The quiet that once frightened you is the original rhythm of your being. You are not losing aliveness. You are remembering stability. What feels like nothing is everything returning to balance. When the chemical storm subsides, perception changes texture. The absence of adrenaline allows reality to appear unfiltered. Faces soften, sound slows, breath deepens. What once felt urgent begins to feel absurd. The need to be chosen, to be seen, to be completed. You recognize how deeply the system equated suffering with significance. True connection requires no surge, no chase, no performance. It exists as mutual coherence, not chemical collision. In this silence, love reveals its real nature, not as reaction, but as resonance. It is not the thunder of collision, but the hum of alignment. No hormones need to prove it, no chaos needs to confirm it. The nervous system, freed from survival mode, learns to trust stillness. Attraction ceases to feel like hunger and begins to feel like recognition without need. When chemistry no longer rules, Connection becomes consciousness remembering itself. Eventually, the illusion unravels. What once felt magnetic now feels mechanical, a series of predictable highs and lows masquerading as emotion. You begin to see how your body was programmed to respond to inconsistency, how your heart mistook adrenaline for love, and how each surge of tension became proof of meaning. This recognition is disorienting at first. Without the chaos, reality appears quieter, almost too still. Yet beneath that stillness is truth, untouched, unedited, unamplified by chemistry. You were never addicted to them. You were addicted to the electricity of your own nervous system. The absence of chemical intensity feels like withdrawal because the mind has been taught to equate balance with boredom. But boredom is simply peace, unrecognized. The nervous system, accustomed to volatility, searches for its familiar charge and calls its absence emptiness. You are detoxing from an emotional algorithm centuries in the making, one reinforced by stories, songs, and systems that glamorized pain as proof of depth. In truth, depth was never in the suffering, it was in the silence that followed once suffering ended. As the circuitry resets, perception shifts from craving to clarity. You start noticing details that chaos once concealed: the tone of sincerity, the rhythm of calm conversation, the subtle language of safety. These sensations once felt foreign, even threatening, because they lacked the voltage of unpredictability. Now they feel sacred. The body, no longer addicted to alarm, begins to recognize resonance. Love, stripped of chemical distortion, becomes quiet recognition rather than combustion. Peace is passion remembered without adrenaline. This detox reveals the deeper architecture of manipulation. Every control system, personal, emotional, or societal, depends on keeping the body dysregulated. The anxious mind is the most compliant mind, the addicted body the most loyal. Once you feel safe and calm, you become uncontrollable. This is why stability was never taught. Chaos was easier to govern. Breaking the chemistry of control is not rebellion against people, but against programming. You cannot be ruled by what no longer excites you. Still, the process requires tenderness. The same hormones that once enslaved you must now be retrained. Cortisol learns to sleep. Dopamine learns to reward presence instead of pursuit. The body does not heal by resisting its signals, but by repurposing them. You breathe through the tremors, allow the cravings, let the waves pass. In doing so, chemistry becomes consciousness. Biology, once a weapon, transforms into wisdom. The body does not forget pain, it rewrites it into peace. When calm finally feels safe, attraction changes nature. You are no longer pulled toward volatility, but toward congruence. The spark that once erupted from tension now glows as quiet alignment. Connection becomes steady, not ecstatic. It no longer burns. It breathes. The nervous system recognizes itself in others who have found the same stillness. Love ceases to be a roller coaster and becomes resonance, two frequencies meeting without collision. Thus, the second archive closes where the storm dissolves into clarity. The chemistry that once dictated devotion now serves awareness. You no longer mistake withdrawal for heartbreak or chaos for depth. The control system has lost its voltage because you stopped supplying it. The nervous system, once an instrument of survival, has remembered its true design, not to react, but to harmonize. You were never meant to burn for love. You were meant to stabilize in it. Archive 3. The Memory of Love. Every attachment begins as repetition. Beneath the surface of affection lies a familiar pulse, the body remembering what the mind has forgotten. Love, in its unconscious form, is memory seeking resolution through another. We are drawn not to newness, but to recognition. The vibration of another's presence awakens the same emotional geometry once etched into the nervous system. By the first experience of love and loss, every lover is an echo wearing a different name. The subconscious mind is an archivist. It records not faces, but frequencies, not events, but sensations. It remembers the warmth before the absence, the promise before the silence. When a new person enters your orbit, the body scans for matching data, the tone, the distance, the rhythm of attention, and if alignment is found, attraction ignites. This is not intuition, it is repetition. The psyche is not discovering love, it is reactivating the neural pattern that once defined it. The present becomes a continuation of the past, disguised as discovery. Each relationship becomes a hologram of memory. You are not seeing the person in front of you. You are projecting the emotional outline of someone behind you. Their gestures, flaws, even their affection are interpreted through this inherited lens. The subconscious superimposes the old photograph over the new image until they merge. This is why patterns persist, not because fate demands them, but because the memory insists on being seen. You are not in love with them. You are in dialogue with your own past. Memory carries its own gravity. It bends perception until every interaction orbits its field. The more unresolved the emotion, the stronger its pull. This is why certain people feel inescapable, not because they are extraordinary, but because they perfectly resonate with the frequency of unfinished pain. The heart, conditioned to seek closure, mistakes recognition for connection. The result is a cycle where love feels urgent but unsafe, magnetic but consuming. The mind romanticizes this pull, calling it soul connection or destiny. Yet destiny is simply the subconscious remembering its design. The chemistry of longing, the poetry of suffering, all are artifacts of the same mechanism. We mythologize repetition because to name it as programming feels unbearable. To call it sacred gives it meaning. To see it as mechanical demands awakening. What we worship as fate is often memory defending its relevance. In truth, love becomes pure only when freed from recognition. When you no longer require the past to validate the present, attraction transforms into awareness. You begin to see people as they are, not as vessels for your unhealed reflection. The longing that once defined intimacy dissolves into clarity. The heart stops asking to be completed and starts learning to witness. Connection ceases to be correction. It becomes communion. And so the third archive opens with remembrance, not of others, but of yourself. The faces that came and went were never random. They were fragments of your own consciousness rehearsing reunion. You were never abandoned. You were being called back to what you left unseen. Every bond, every heartbreak, every return was memory fulfilling its sacred function, to remind you that love, when no longer bound to history, becomes awareness embodied. You were never falling for them, you were falling into what remained of you. Memory does not live in the mind, it lives in the field. It speaks through sensation long before thought interprets it. A glance, a scent, a tone of voice, and the body floods with recognition. You tell yourself it's chemistry, but it's resonance. The subconscious, always scanning for continuity, finds a match and ignites the loop. The emotion feels immediate, but it is ancient. You are not beginning something new. You are entering a scene already in progress. Attraction is memory disguised as discovery. This mechanism explains why certain people feel like home and others do not. It's not destiny, it's data. The psyche measures vibration, not virtue. When the nervous system detects a familiar pattern, it interprets safety, even if that pattern once caused harm. The past, unresolved, becomes a magnet for the present. What feels like connection is actually calibration, the psyche aligning with the frequency it knows how to survive. The paradox of trauma is that it seeks its own repetition to prove it can be endured again. This repetition often wears the mask of romance. The thrill of recognition, the déjà vu of intimacy, all signal that the subconscious has located its mirror. The mind, unaware of the pattern, calls it love. The more alike the energy feels to the original wound, the stronger the pull. That is why you can feel both terrified and enchanted in the same breath. The body remembers both pleasure and pain as the same language of aliveness. It doesn't care if the story ends well. It only cares that the story continues. The subconscious does not seek healing. It seeks familiarity. When two unhealed memories meet, they call it connection. When two aware memories meet, they call it reflection. The difference is consciousness. Without awareness, love becomes projection, an unconscious film played across another's form. Every argument, every expectation, every heartbreak is part of the same screenplay. You're not fighting each other. You're fighting the past. The person across from you becomes the screen upon which your unprocessed emotions finally find visibility. The most intoxicating relationships are often the most repetitive. They cycle through the same highs and lows with surgical precision. The tension builds, the chemistry peaks, the distance grows, then reunion brings euphoria. This rhythm feels cosmic but is chemical. It is the psyche's way of measuring continuity. The repetition proving that the pattern still holds. Until awareness breaks the rhythm, love remains an echo chamber, replaying emotion as proof of existence. Repetition feels like love, until awareness feels like freedom. But there is beauty hidden even here. Each reenactment carries data, a chance to witness what once remained unconscious. The moment you feel the pull, pause. Ask not why them, but what do they represent? The attraction becomes revelation. The trigger becomes teacher. The pattern is not against you. It is your history asking to be remembered consciously. This shift transforms every heartbreak into curriculum. Awareness reclaims energy once trapped in nostalgia. Thus, the memory of love becomes mirror, not prison. You no longer need the past to replay itself to feel alive. The signal that once called you into repetition now calls you into recognition. Love ceases to be a reenactment and becomes resonance, not between two wounded fragments, but between two whole frequencies. You do not fall into it anymore. You expand through it. The end of repetition is not the death of passion. It is the birth of clarity. As awareness deepens, memory begins to dissolve its boundaries. You no longer see the past as a chain, but as architecture, a structure that once held you until you could stand within yourself. Each heartbreak, each repetition was a beam supporting the house of consciousness. You realize that those who hurt you were not destroyers, but builders, constructing reflection strong enough for you to recognize your own design. Every heartbreak was consciousness carving out space for awareness to live. When you remember without pain, the loop loses gravity. The faces that once haunted you now appear as symbols rather than stories. Their words, gestures, and endings no longer pull you backward. They dissolve into patterns, like equations solved. You begin to feel gratitude where grief used to live, not as forgiveness, but as comprehension. You were never trying to move on. You were trying to integrate the fragments of yourself, scattered across different names. Love was simply the map of return. This is where attraction transforms into recognition without attachment. You can feel resonance with someone without needing to merge or possess. The same frequency that once compelled you now informs you. The nervous system, once addicted to the past, now uses the same sensitivity to detect alignment. What once produced chaos now produces coherence. The body, retrained, no longer chases electricity. It listens for harmony. Healing is not the absence of emotion. It is emotion freed from repetition. As the psyche integrates, memory rewrites itself into understanding. The child who sought approval, the lover who sought rescue, the seeker who feared abandonment, all dissolve into one observer who no longer searches. You can feel the younger versions of yourself resting now, not erased, but embraced. The need to prove worth through another's love fades. You no longer require reflection to know you exist. Presence itself becomes confirmation. The illusion of loss collapses next. You see that nothing was ever truly taken from you. The energy of every connection still circulates through the field, reconfigured, neutralized, alive. The heart does not break. It expands to accommodate what it once resisted. Even separation becomes sacred. The one who left did not remove love. They reintroduced you to its source. What you called endings were initiations into remembering. No love is wasted when it leads you back to yourself. In this clarity, relationships transform from repetition to revelation. You no longer need intensity to feel intimacy. Stillness itself feels romantic. The eyes of another no longer mirror your absence. They reflect your wholeness. You relate from fullness, not from hunger. Every interaction becomes an exchange of awareness rather than a negotiation of wounds. You can love without losing yourself, because there is no separation left to defend. Thus, the third archive closes with synthesis. Memory no longer dictates motion, it informs it. The ghosts of repetition have completed their purpose, returning their energy to presence. Love, freed from the weight of remembrance, becomes transparent. You feel not the pull of chemistry, but the peace of coherence. What once replayed as pain now radiates as pattern recognized. You have not forgotten them. You have remembered what they were sent to remind you of, yourself. Archive 4. The Attachment Loop. Attachment is not connection, it is containment. Beneath every bond lies an invisible contract between memory and survival. Stay close to what you know, even if it hurts. The mind calls this love, but the body calls it safety. The loop begins the moment affection becomes dependency, when comfort is replaced by craving and connection becomes currency. What you feel as devotion is often the nervous system bargaining with its own fear of abandonment. Attachment is loyalty to the pattern that first made you feel alive. The architecture of the loop is simple yet absolute. It begins with anticipation, the hope of being seen. This expectation activates old circuitry, and with it, the chemical surge of excitement and anxiety. When attention is given, dopamine rewards the body. When it is withdrawn, cortisol punishes it. Pleasure and fear fuse into one experience. You start chasing reassurance, not love. The absence of the other feels like the end of existence, because the loop has convinced you that connection is oxygen. Each cycle strengthens the circuitry. The higher the emotional high, the deeper the crash. The pain that follows separation feels unbearable not because of loss, but because the system collapses without stimulation. The nervous system, addicted to oscillation, demands restoration of chaos. This is why reconciliation feels euphoric, not because harmony has been restored, but because the body has regained its familiar turbulence. What you call missing them is often missing the chemical storm they created. The subconscious interprets repetition as survival. To it, what repeats must be safe, otherwise it would not persist. Thus, the mind becomes loyal to pain under the illusion of protection. It will defend the loop as devotion, glorify it as passion, and justify it as love. The more aware you become, the more deceit you uncover. Yet even awareness struggles against biology. The body craves what awareness rejects. This is the paradox of the attachment loop. The intellect knows, the organism obeys. You begin to understand that this pattern does not seek affection. It seeks equilibrium. The loop is the psyche's attempt to stabilize by recreating the original fracture. Each partner represents an opportunity to end what began in childhood. The moment love became conditional, attention became earned, and peace became temporary. The attachment loop is the subconscious begging for closure through repetition. But closure, sought externally, always opens the same door again. What you chase for healing is often what keeps you wounded. The illusion persists because the loop is self-correcting. Every attempt to escape it becomes proof of its power. When you leave, it rewrites the story as longing. When you return, it calls the pain destiny. The mind becomes archivist and author simultaneously, curating memories to reinforce its addiction. You can even feel nostalgia for the suffering itself, as though pain were proof of meaning. The system prefers torment to emptiness, because emptiness feels like death to the addicted psyche. And yet, the very awareness of this mechanism begins to dissolve it. The moment you can observe the craving without answering it, the circuitry falters. Space appears between impulse and action, and within that space, freedom. You start to recognize that love and longing are not synonymous, that missing someone is not the same as belonging with them. The loop survives on reaction. Observation starves it. You do not need to fight attachment. You need only stop mistaking it for love. Every loop survives through contrast, connection followed by withdrawal, warmth followed by coldness, attention followed by absence. This pendulum keeps the nervous system engaged, oscillating between hope and despair. The very inconsistency that wounds you is what convinces you to stay, because stability feels foreign, and unpredictability feels alive. This is the paradox of the addicted heart. It cannot tell the difference between safety and stimulation. You do not crave the person. You crave the rhythm of their inconsistency. When affection is given unpredictably, the brain releases dopamine in anticipation rather than fulfillment. The promise of love becomes more addictive than its presence. The moment you feel secure, the chemistry fades. You unconsciously provoke distance to recreate the chase. Arguments are not accidents. They are withdrawals engineered by the subconscious to restore the cycle. The pain after conflict becomes the dosage of intensity that keeps the body loyal to the loop. This pattern mimics devotion but operates as dependency. You call it connection because it feels consuming, but consumption is not communion. True intimacy expands you. Addiction contracts you. The mind does not realize it has been trained to equate intensity with importance. The higher the emotional voltage, the more valuable the relationship seems. Yet the power of love was never measured by its extremes, but by its steadiness, the one quality the wounded psyche cannot yet tolerate. The system calls chaos love because peace feels like emptiness. The loop also feeds on fantasy. You fall in love not with who they are, but with who they might become once the pain stops. This imagined resolution keeps the story alive long after evidence of alignment has disappeared. The psyche mistakes potential for promise and invests devotion into possibility. This is how trauma disguises itself as hope, by turning the future into a continuation of the past. The cycle thrives because you are not addicted to reality. You are addicted to imagination. The body, however, knows the truth. It grows weary of the hormonal roller coaster, the cortisol spikes, the restless vigilance. It begins to crave the neutrality it once misread as boredom. At first, this craving feels like numbness, but numbness is simply nervous system fatigue, the aftermath of prolonged hyperactivation. The exhaustion you feel is not apathy. It is the body's quiet refusal to keep performing old scripts. Healing begins the moment chaos stops feeling romantic. Awareness enters through stillness. The first time you do not respond, do not text, do not chase, the system panics. It floods you with loneliness and guilt to lure you back into motion. But if you can hold the silence, something extraordinary happens. The voltage drops. The body learns that calm does not equal abandonment, that presence does not require pursuit. This is emotional reprogramming in real time, replacing addiction with awareness. The loop weakens not through resistance but through non-participation. Soon the emptiness that once terrified you begins to feel spacious. You sense the first breath of self-trust, an energy that does not depend on reciprocity to remain steady. You realize you were never addicted to love, only to regulation through another. The moment you become your own equilibrium, the loop loses purpose. The end of attachment is not detachment, it is remembrance of wholeness. As the current fades, the illusion of loss surfaces. Without the emotional turbulence, life appears quieter, almost unfamiliar. The silence that follows the loop feels like absence, but it is actually detox, the nervous system adjusting to peace after years of chaos. The mind calls it loneliness, yet nothing is missing. What's leaving is the chemical identity built on pursuit and performance. You are not losing love, you are losing dependency. The emptiness you feel is not absence, it is space returning to you. The psyche resists this reclamation. It searches for new forms of stimulation, new distractions, new obsessions, anything to avoid stillness. The body interprets calm as danger because it has been conditioned to equate vigilance with survival. So it whispers, reach out, check their profile, revisit the memory. Each thought is a lure, each impulse a test, yet this craving holds no truth. It is the ghost of the loop asking to be fed. When you refuse to engage, the ghost fades. Awareness outlasts addiction. Freedom begins not when you stop feeling, but when you stop interpreting feeling as instruction. The ache no longer commands, it informs. The longing that once demanded action now serves as signal, a reminder of where energy was once outsourced. You do not need to fight desire, you only need to stop obeying it. The body learns that emotion is weather, not identity. The storm can pass without evacuation. Healing is not control over emotion, it is no longer being controlled by it. In this neutrality, the mind encounters an unfamiliar sensation, stillness without fear. There is no chase, no high, no collapse. Presence stretches into itself, vast and unbroken. You realize that attachment was never about another person. It was the psyche's way of avoiding its own emptiness. The partner was merely the interface between you and your forgotten self. Love was the decoy through which awareness rediscovered its center. The moment this truth integrates, attraction changes polarity. You are no longer drawn to intensity, but to coherence. You begin to notice how peaceful energy feels magnetic in a different way, not through voltage, but through resonance. Calm people, once dismissed as uninteresting, now radiate stability. Chaos no longer seduces because you have learned its language too well. You can sense the vibration of manipulation and respond with silence instead of submission. What once triggered pursuit now triggers presence. As this new coherence stabilizes, forgiveness arises naturally. Not the sentimental kind, but energetic release. You understand that those who kept you looping were not villains. They were teachers disguised as triggers. Each of them revealed the shape of the chain until you remembered how to unfasten it. The resentment dissolves because you no longer need a story to explain the pain. The lesson completed itself through recognition. Thus, the fourth archive closes with restoration. The body, once addicted to oscillation, now vibrates in equilibrium. The psyche, once enslaved by longing, now remembers autonomy. What was once a loop has become a circuit of awareness, energy returning to its source instead of escaping through repetition. You no longer seek to be chosen. You are simply present. You were never meant to break the pattern, only to become so conscious that it could no longer continue. To understand the system that taught your body to confuse chaos with love, revisit the previous archive, Why Anxiety Was Engineered, Forbidden Architecture of Control. There you'll recognize how anticipation and fear became the original architecture of emotional captivity. Archive 5. The Body Remembers. Before the mind can understand, the body already knows. It stores every vibration of love, loss, and longing in cellular memory, a biological archive of the psyche's unfinished stories. Each muscle carries the echoes of attachment. Each breath contains the signature of survival. You may forget names and events, but the body never forgets tone, pressure, temperature. It remembers through sensation, through microcurrents in the nervous system that replay the frequency of the past. Trauma does not live in thought, it lives in flesh. The heart does not beat in isolation. It synchronizes with the electromagnetic rhythm of memory, contracting differently when faced with familiarity. The subconscious uses this internal metronome to determine safety. Does this presence match the frequency of my origin? If yes, attraction ignites, not from desire, but from resonance. This is why the body leans toward certain people before logic intervenes. It recognizes its own unfinished vibration reflected in another nervous system. What feels like destiny is physiology fulfilling its programming. Each touch awakens stored electricity. A simple embrace can open archives sealed for decades. Muscles tense not from resistance but recognition. The body trembles not because it fears, but because it remembers. Every cell participates in this rehearsal of history, reenacting the old choreography of closeness and distance, of surrender and defense. You are not reacting to the person before you. You are re-experiencing the chemical sequence of a forgotten story. The present moment is never clean. It carries the fingerprints of every memory before it. This memory is not punishment, it is persistence. The body replays what the mind refuses to feel. Suppressed emotion becomes instruction for muscle, posture, breath. Shoulders rise to guard against invisible judgment. The stomach tightens to anticipate rejection. The throat constricts to silence truth. The subconscious speaks fluently through tension, and the body listens obediently. Until awareness interrupts, the cycle of remembrance continues under the name of personality. To the conscious mind, this repetition appears as preference, the type you're drawn to, the emotional patterns that feel inevitable. But to the body, it is simply completion-seeking form. It returns to the same emotional temperature until the circuit of reaction can run without resistance. The purpose of repetition is resolution, not torment. The body will keep re-entering the same frequency until the stored charge is discharged. We repeat what we have not yet metabolized. Awareness begins where sensation is allowed. When you stop interpreting emotion as threat and start feeling it as information, the memory begins to soften. Tremors, tears, warmth, fatigue. These are not malfunctions but releases. The nervous system sheds history through movement, sound, and stillness. You are not relapsing, you are releasing. The body is completing what the mind has long avoided. Thus, the fifth archive opens with remembrance through sensation. Healing here is not conceptual, it is electrical. The loop of attachment dissolves not by thinking differently, but by feeling completely. To restore the nervous system is to let energy finish its forgotten cycle. The body is not your cage, it is your compass. It remembers pain so you can finally remember peace. When emotion is suppressed, it does not disappear. It relocates. It hides beneath the skin, weaving itself into tissue, organ, breath. The body becomes the subconscious made visible. Every ache, every knot, every chronic tension is an unspoken sentence that never found its ending. These are not malfunctions, but messages, fragments of unexpressed energy frozen in time. The body is not betraying you. It is communicating in the only language it remembers. What the mind forgets, the body keeps repeating until it is heard. You can trace these memories not through analysis, but through awareness. Notice how your chest tightens around honesty, how your stomach contracts before disappointment, how your jaw stiffens when you silence truth. Each reflex is a recording of the original moment you felt powerless. The muscles became armor. The breath became boundary. Over time, these defenses fused with identity. You no longer know where protection ends and personality begins. The tension that once kept you safe now keeps you small. The nervous system, loyal to survival, equates familiarity with safety, even when familiarity is pain, so it keeps the old emotional temperatures alive. The heart rate spikes at gentleness, the body braces during silence, peace feels like exposure. The system cannot yet distinguish between calm and danger because both activate the same memory. This is why healing can feel threatening. It challenges the body's oldest definition of safety. The body trusts what it knows, even if what it knows is hurt. But the body is also the portal to liberation. When you bring awareness into sensation without resistance, memory begins to reorganize itself. Shaking, yawning, tears, heat. These spontaneous releases are not breakdowns, but breakthroughs. Energy once frozen in vigilance begins to flow again. The organism discharges centuries of cellular vigilance in seconds of surrender. This is the language of freedom, not words, but movement. The body speaks truth fluently when the mind stops interrupting. Stillness, then, becomes sacred technology. Each breath taken consciously recalibrates the field. The diaphragm, once constricted by fear, becomes a pump of equilibrium. With every slow exhale, the nervous system learns neutrality. With every pause, memory unwinds. Healing is not a miracle, but a repetition of safety, the deliberate reintroduction of calm until the body remembers it is home. The more you breathe into stillness, the less your past can breathe through you. The mind, witnessing this release, often rushes to label it. It asks, "What is this from? Why now?" But understanding is not required. Feeling is. Analysis belongs to the intellect. Liberation belongs to the body. The past exits through sensation, not explanation. The shaking, the tears, the exhaustion. These are evidence of integration, not failure. The body does not need your permission to heal, only your presence. Awareness without sensation is observation without embodiment. In this way, the body becomes the temple of completion. Every vibration, every contraction, every release is a ceremony of remembrance. You are not being undone. You are being rewritten. Pain is not a curse, but a signal that energy is still in transit. When you stop labeling sensations as problems, they become portals. Through the body, the subconscious finally finds language. Through awareness, the loop finds its end. You are not healing the body is healing you. When the body begins to trust awareness, memory transforms from burden to blueprint. The same sensations that once caused contraction now become coordinates, guiding you back to equilibrium. Pain no longer signals danger, it signals data. Each ache is a compass pointing toward where energy still circulates without closure. Instead of suppressing discomfort, you start listening to it. The body becomes oracle, revealing in every twitch or breath the exact frequency that asks for recognition. What once hurt you now teaches you where to look. Through this intimacy, you begin to sense that memory is not linear but vibrational. The body does not organize events by time, but by tone. A sound, a smell, a temperature, and suddenly the entire field shifts. You are not traveling backward. You are tuning into the resonance of a moment still active in your nervous system. The past is not behind you. It lives as a frequency within you. Healing, therefore, is not erasing memory, but neutralizing its charge until every vibration feels safe again. As neutrality returns, movement becomes sacred. You start to notice how walking, stretching, even breathing feels like reprogramming. Each conscious gesture rewires pathways once devoted to defense. The shoulders no longer carry vigilance. The spine no longer braces against the unseen. The body reclaims fluidity, its natural state before conditioning hardened it. Healing is not a destination but a rhythm, a steady conversation between awareness and tissue. Freedom is not leaving the body. It is living inside it without fear. The more you inhabit this rhythm, the more silence reveals itself beneath sensation. You begin to feel the hum that has always existed below emotion, a constant, quiet vibration untouched by trauma or thought. This hum is your original frequency, the body's baseline before interference. When awareness aligns with it, all fragmentation disappears. You no longer feel like a mind observing a body, but as one field breathing itself. The separation between healing and being healed dissolves. This realization changes how you experience intimacy. Connection is no longer the collision of two incomplete systems, but the resonance of two coherent ones. The body, once reactive, now responds. Touch becomes communication, not confirmation. Presence becomes enough. You sense others not through projection, but through vibration. In this clarity, empathy evolves from merging into mirroring, a reflection of shared stillness rather than shared pain. When the body is clear, love stops echoing trauma. Eventually, you recognize that the body was never your limitation. It was your teacher. Every contraction, illness, or fatigue was a message, not a malfunction. It was consciousness sculpting your attention back into embodiment. The divine hides itself not in transcendence, but in tissue, asking to be remembered through sensation. Once the lesson is heard, the body relaxes into devotion, no longer armor but altar. The sacred was never above you, it was breathing through your pulse. Thus, the fifth archive closes in wholeness. The body, once burdened by history, now vibrates as presence itself. Every cell becomes lucid, every breath fluent in silence. Memory has fulfilled its function, not to haunt, but to harmonize. You no longer fear what the body holds, because you realize it holds nothing foreign. Every tremor, every release, every beat was you calling yourself home. You were never trapped inside the body was waiting for you to return. Archive 6. The Illusion of Closure. Closure does not end the story, it restarts it. The mind, desperate for resolution, constructs rituals of completion to disguise its fear of stillness. You tell yourself you are healing, yet beneath every goodbye hides the hope of return. The psyche confuses finality with control. It believes that understanding the wound will neutralize its power, yet in seeking explanation it reactivates the loop. The search for closure is the subconscious asking for one more repetition. You reach for closure because the nervous system cannot tolerate ambiguity. It wants to categorize emotion into past and present, loss and lesson. But emotion is not linear. It moves like weather, revisiting until integrated. When you try to seal what remains unprocessed, you compress energy that still wants to move. The letters, the talks, the attempts to get answers, all are methods of prolonging connection under the disguise of healing. The need to be understood becomes the final thread of attachment. This is how the illusion sustains itself. The more you seek closure from others, the more you reinforce their role in your emotional regulation. You place your peace in their response, your freedom in their recognition. But no one can close a loop they did not create. Each explanation you demand feeds the same circuit of dependency. You are not seeking truth. You are seeking permission to stop waiting. Closure is not peace. It is the hope that pain will explain itself. The system's intelligence hides within this paradox. The loop ensures survival by keeping emotion in motion. The story must remain incomplete, so the psyche can continue rehearsing identity through pain. It is not sabotage. It is preservation. The unhealed wound becomes the foundation of self, and to resolve it feels like death to the ego. This is why the mind returns to the past even when the body knows better, because the narrative of suffering is its proof of existence. Awareness interrupts this ritual by refusing interpretation. Instead of seeking closure, you begin to feel the raw energy beneath the story, the ache without label, the vibration without memory. The pain becomes sensation, and sensation becomes current. In that instant, the wound stops being history and becomes electricity ready to discharge. Healing happens not when you understand the past, but when you stop needing it to justify the present. Freedom arrives when the story no longer needs an ending. The illusion of closure also thrives in self-dialogue. You replay conversations that never happened, rewrite outcomes in imagination, argue with ghosts. The psyche uses fantasy as therapy, creating simulations of reconciliation to trick the nervous system into calm. But the calm never lasts because the body knows the difference between resolution and rehearsal. The cycle continues until you surrender the need for closure as proof of healing. Closure does not come through understanding. It comes through release. And so the sixth archive opens by dismantling the final defense of the loop, the belief that peace is achieved through explanation. True peace requires no dialogue, no final word, no permission. The silence you once feared is not absence, but truth unfiltered. When you stop searching for closure, emotion ceases to orbit around the past. The loop loses its purpose, for there is nothing left to complete. You do not heal by closing. You heal by opening without needing to close again. Closure seduces through logic, whispering that peace is only one conversation away. The psyche imagines a final exchange where understanding will cleanse emotion, where words will undo pain. Yet this fantasy is maintenance, not medicine. Every message sent, every explanation sought, every imagined reunion keeps the system vibrating at the frequency of absence. What you call just needing clarity is the nervous system begging for its familiar chaos. Closure is the mind's way of keeping the wound open under the illusion of healing it. The body recognizes this before the intellect does. Notice how, before you reach out, the pulse accelerates, the stomach tightens, breath shortens. The chemistry of anticipation begins to brew, not peace, but adrenaline. This is the same hormonal signature that fueled the attachment loop. The act of seeking closure reawakens the same pattern it claims to end. You feel alive again, but the aliveness is stress disguised as significance. The nervous system mistakes stimulation for resolution. True closure, paradoxically, feels like nothing. No grand revelation, no cinematic ending, no emotional climax. Just neutrality. But neutrality feels empty to a system conditioned to associate intensity with meaning. When the drama ends, silence sounds like absence. You think something is missing, when in truth, the addiction to meaning is dying. The absence you resist is integration, the body finally learning to exist without its usual noise. Healing feels like loss only because chaos used to mean love. This is the stage where the psyche bargains. It tells you that reaching out for peace is harmless, that one more explanation will close the gap. But awareness recognizes the deception. The need for closure is never about truth, only about contact. The mind will trade serenity for a few seconds of reactivation. It would rather feel something familiar than feel nothing unknown. Until this is seen, the pattern disguises longing as honesty and relapse as courage. The deeper truth is that no one can grant you closure because the story was never between two people. It was between awareness and its own reflection. The other was the mirror through which memory saw itself. You are not waiting for their apology. You are waiting to stop asking permission to move on. The apology you crave is self-recognition. The moment you realize you no longer need to be understood to be complete. Closure is self-communication mistaken for dialogue. When you stop pursuing explanation, energy returns to coherence. The power, once invested in analysis, becomes presence. You feel the gravitational pull of the past weakening, the emotional charge flattening into stillness. There are no more highs or lows, only quiet. The silence that terrified you becomes sanctuary. The absence of resolution reveals something greater than reconciliation, freedom from reaction. And so, the illusion of closure collapses not in confrontation, but in surrender. You cannot complete the story because you were never meant to. You were meant to transcend it. The mind's need for endings dissolves into the body's rhythm of continuation. Life does not close, it circulates. Every moment becomes a new beginning because nothing needs to be fixed. The loop ends when you no longer demand it to end, when you realize it already has. Eventually, awareness sees that closure was never a destination but a disguise, a way for the ego to keep feeling important in the absence of chaos. Without the story, identity dissolves. Without the wound, the self built to survive it has no purpose. This is why the mind clings to its pain. It mistakes emotional charge for proof of life. But the soul does not need conflict to confirm existence. Its validation is silence, not noise. You are not losing yourself when you stop feeling the pain. You are losing who you were inside the pain. When the cycle fades, something unexpected arises. Grief for the old self. You mourn not the person you lost, but the version of you who kept fighting for closure, who believed peace must be earned. This mourning is sacred. It is consciousness burying an outdated identity. The tears that come are not regression but rebirth, emotion leaving the body because its purpose has been fulfilled. The system empties itself to make space for neutrality. In the quiet that follows, life begins to feel weightless. You stop narrating every emotion, stop explaining every shift. The need to label what happens to you dissolves. Experience becomes direct, unmediated by thought. There is no more audience in your head analyzing each scene. Reality no longer performs for meaning. It simply unfolds. Closure was the curtain. Awareness is the stage revealed when it falls. Now the body speaks a different language. The pulse slows, breathing deepens, muscles soften. The nervous system no longer operates on vigilance but rhythm. Peace feels safe again, because peace is no longer foreign. You can feel waves of calm moving through you like quiet electricity. The body rewiring itself to recognize stillness as strength. What once felt like emptiness now feels like spaciousness, and within that space, truth vibrates without interference. From this space, relationships shift form. You no longer look for completion, you look for reflection. Every interaction becomes a mirror test. Does this energy amplify peace or reawaken the loop? Attachment is replaced by attunement. You listen with your whole field, not just your emotions. You can love without merging, care without clinging. Intimacy no longer threatens identity because identity has been replaced by awareness. You do not meet people to finish old stories. You meet them to remember new frequencies. As this integration anchors, the psyche recognizes that closure was never needed because nothing real ever ends. Energy does not vanish, it evolves. The love you gave, the pain you felt, the memories you held, all still exist, transmuted into higher coherence. You are not abandoning the past, but reabsorbing it. The story remains, but the suffering does not. This is the essence of transcendence, remembrance without reaction. Thus, the sixth archive completes its function. Closure was never an event to reach, but a veil to remove. Once lifted, you see that healing was not a process of fixing. It was a process of remembering that nothing was ever broken. The mind searched for endings. Awareness discovered continuity. Peace is not what happens after the story. It is what was always underneath it. There is no closure, only clarity, and clarity is the end of the loop. Archive 7. The Mirror Partner. Every relationship is a reflection, not a meeting. What you call attraction is resonance, your inner frequency finding itself in another field. The person before you is not a stranger, but a surface upon which your unconscious becomes visible. The mirror partner appears not to love you, but to reveal you. They hold up what you deny, what you repress, and what you have forgotten to integrate. You never meet people. You meet patterns wearing faces. The mirror dynamic is the psyche's most sophisticated teaching method. When awareness resists introspection, Life externalizes the lesson through another human being. Their presence triggers your hidden architecture, your fear of rejection, your longing for validation, your buried anger. The emotions they evoke are not reactions to them, but reflections of you. Every argument, every projection, every spark of desire is consciousness trying to recognize itself through contrast. The other becomes your curriculum. This is why chemistry feels divine and confrontation feels fated. The mirror partner embodies both heaven and hell, expansion and contraction in one form. They activate the entire nervous system, forcing you to witness what equilibrium truly means. The love feels sacred because it collapses your boundaries, exposing where self-image ends and authenticity begins. They do not come to stay, they come to awaken. Some souls arrive not to comfort you, but to complete your remembering. In the reflection, clarity sharpens. The traits you adore reveal your dormant qualities. The ones you despise expose your disowned aspects. Every irritation is an invitation to retrieve a fragment of self. Every admiration is proof of projection. When you stop blaming and start observing, judgment turns into revelation. The mirror does not lie. It only amplifies. The degree of reaction equals the degree of repression. What disturbs you most is where awareness is being summoned most strongly. Yet the ego resists this recognition. It clings to moral narratives. Who is right? Who is wrong? Who hurt whom? Because identity depends on separation. To see the other as self threatens the foundation of individuality. The mind prefers suffering over sameness, for in sameness it loses control. But the mirror is patient. It keeps reflecting until humility replaces defense. The moment you stop defending, understanding floods in. The reflection becomes revelation. You suffer in others only until you remember they are extensions of you. As awareness grows, relationships shift from reaction to reflection. Conflict transforms into communication. Instead of saying, "You make me feel," you begin to say, "This feeling is mine." Ownership rewrites the energy. Projection ends where responsibility begins. The nervous system, once inflamed by blame, calms under the warmth of acceptance. What was once a battlefield becomes a laboratory, a place to observe consciousness observing itself. Thus, the seventh archive opens as a mirror held to memory. It teaches that love was never about completion, but recognition. The partner who triggered you most was the one who served you most. They reflected your frequency until you could perceive it without distortion. When you finally see yourself clearly through another, the need for mirrors dissolves. The ultimate relationship is not between two people, it is between awareness and its own reflection. The mirror intensifies until you can see without resistance. Every trigger is a pulse of light hitting an unpolished surface, a signal of where awareness still fractures. When anger arises, it points not to their flaw, but to your forgotten boundary. When jealousy surfaces, it reveals the part of you that doubts your own worth. The mirror does not judge, it calibrates. It shows precisely where love must be restored inward before it can be exchanged outward. Every emotion projected onto another is an unopened letter addressed to yourself. The reflection evolves through cycles of intimacy and distance. At first, the proximity feels magnetic, as if you are merging with your own essence. Then, suddenly, friction appears. This is not failure, it is exposure. The psyche, once enchanted by sameness, begins to notice contrast. The honeymoon was resonance. The conflict is integration. Where the frequencies diverge, evolution begins. The relationship becomes a crucible, the heat necessary to fuse fragments into wholeness. This is why certain connections feel karmic. They pull you in with force, test you beyond logic, then release you abruptly. They are not meant to last, they are meant to reprogram. Once the data of the lesson is absorbed, the bond dissolves, leaving behind clarity and emptiness. The pain of their absence is not proof of loss. It is withdrawal from transformation. The nervous system grieves because the mirror's intensity was mistaken for love. Some mirrors are not partners. They are portals. The ego, however, calls this abandonment. It cannot comprehend that endings are upgrades, not punishments. It chases replacement mirrors to maintain reflection, mistaking the loss of stimulation for the loss of meaning. Yet, when awareness matures, you begin to crave authenticity over activation. You prefer peace to drama, coherence to chemistry. The people who once thrilled your chaos now bore your clarity. You outgrow distortion, and in doing so, you outgrow the need for mirrors. Still, gratitude remains for every reflection. You understand that even betrayal was service, showing you where trust in yourself had been outsourced. Rejection was redirection towards self-recognition. Every conflict carved out new emotional intelligence. The mirror was never cruel, it was exact. The universe does not send punishment, only precision. The same energy that once broke you apart now aligns you to your center. The wound was not the mirror's cruelty, it was your resistance to seeing. With this understanding, love transforms from dependence into discernment. You no longer seek others to confirm who you are. You meet them to expand what you've remembered. Every gaze becomes gentle, for there is nothing left to defend. Every goodbye becomes graceful, for there is nothing left to hold. You realize that connection was never possession. It was participation in the same field of awareness, temporarily shared. And so, the mirror loses its power because you have absorbed its purpose. You become transparent, no longer reflecting distortion, but transmitting truth. Others feel peace around you, not because you fix them, but because you no longer project upon them. The cycle of mirrored suffering ends in clarity. When you master the mirror, you become the light it once reflected. When all projections are withdrawn, relationship ceases to be theater and becomes transparency. You no longer need roles, validation, or emotional choreography to feel alive. The energy that once oscillated between you and another now circulates within you, steady, luminous, self-sustaining. This is not detachment, it is integration. The same current that once sought recognition through reflection now radiates as coherence. The highest form of love is no longer reflection, but resonance. In this resonance, connection becomes effortless. You begin to attract from authenticity, not from absence. Those who enter your field mirror your clarity, not your conflict. Encounters feel lighter, dialogues cleaner, affection quieter yet deeper. The nervous system no longer trembles before intimacy because it no longer equates love with loss. What used to feel like danger now feels like alignment. Relationships become extensions of stillness, not distractions from it. This evolution also redefines intimacy. It is no longer the merging of two incomplete halves, but the meeting of two luminous wholes. Vulnerability is no longer exposure, but communion, the recognition of shared awareness in different bodies. You do not disappear into love, you expand through it. Desire becomes devotion without dependency. When both mirrors are clean, they reflect infinity. Two transparent beings do not complete each other, they amplify eternity. The mirror partner's lesson was never about the other person, it was about perception. Once you could see without distortion, the need for external teachers ended. Life itself became your mirror. Every sound, every silence, every face, a reflection of consciousness interacting with itself. You stop labeling experiences as good or bad. You see them as frequencies modulating awareness. The world stops happening to you and begins happening as you. This realization births a new form of compassion. You understand that everyone you meet is trapped inside their own reflection, mistaking reaction for reality. You no longer judge the unconscious because you remember what it felt like to live through distortion. Instead of trying to fix or save, you emit coherence, a silent frequency that invites remembrance. Love becomes guidance through presence alone. Teaching ends when embodiment begins. Eventually, even the concept of mirror dissolves. You no longer think in dualities of self and other, teacher and student, reflection and observer. There is only light refracting through countless forms, playing at separation. You see your former partners not as mistakes, but as sacred calibrations, precise alignments that sculpted your awareness into transparency. Every heartbreak was the polishing of the lens. Every goodbye was the clearing of glass. Thus, the seventh archive completes in lucidity. The mirrors have shattered, yet nothing is broken, only light now, refracted but whole. There is no longer any lesson to extract, no reflection to decipher. You are not the image, nor the glass, but the radiance passing through both. Love has fulfilled its evolutionary purpose. You no longer seek to be seen, because you have become the seeing itself. Archive 8. The Reversal of Loyalty. Healing begins when loyalty changes direction, from the outer to the inner, from others to self. For lifetimes, consciousness has been trained to worship reflection, approval, validation, connection. It built its sense of worth through the reactions of others, mistaking attention for existence. But the moment awareness turns inward, the contract of dependency dissolves. The self once divided between seeking and being collapses into singular presence. True loyalty is not devotion to others. It is fidelity to your own frequency. This reversal feels like betrayal at first. The nervous system, conditioned to measure safety through belonging, panics when detachment begins. It interprets silence as abandonment, solitude as punishment. You begin to question if peace means isolation, if authenticity will cost you love. But these doubts are simply the echoes of the old allegiance, the psyche mourning the collapse of its external gods. Each wave of discomfort is proof that the system is detoxing from emotional servitude. The old loyalty ran deep. You once sacrificed truth for harmony, authenticity for acceptance, energy for inclusion. You called it love, but it was survival. Every compromise carved distance between who you are and who you presented to be. The identity you defended was built on borrowed beliefs, inherited patterns, and emotional contracts signed in fear. When you begin to reclaim that energy, those contracts dissolve, and with them, the illusion of dependency. You did not lose people, you lost the versions of yourself you created to keep them. As awareness returns, so does power. Energy that once scattered outward through apology and explanation now flows inward as clarity. You realize that loyalty to others was never love. It was fear disguised as virtue. The impulse to please was a strategy to avoid rejection. But once you no longer fear rejection, obedience becomes obsolete. The approval that once enslaved you now feels irrelevant, even foreign. Peace no longer requires permission. This is the beginning of sovereignty, when your nervous system calibrates to your own signal instead of others. You stop chasing coherence through connection and start generating it through alignment. Relationships no longer dictate your self-perception, they reflect it. You meet people from wholeness, not hunger. Their reactions may shift, but your stability remains. The loyalty once given to maintaining attachment now fuels the maintenance of awareness. Freedom is not disconnection, it is unconditioned connection. With this inner allegiance, your life reorganizes. Boundaries no longer feel like barriers, but like membranes of integrity. Saying no longer feels cruel, it feels clean. You stop explaining choices that were never anyone's to validate. The same energy once wasted on negotiation now becomes creative force. You begin to sense how power moves when unfragmented, not as dominance, but as direction. The current of self-trust replaces the static of external approval. Thus, the eighth archive opens with reclamation. The pendulum that once swung outward begins to rest its center. Loyalty no longer fractures attention, it focuses it. You do not turn against the world. You turn toward yourself. What you once called selfishness reveals itself as sacred responsibility. You are not abandoning connection. You are anchoring coherence. You were never meant to serve the reflections around you, only the light that projects them. The deeper this reversal anchors, the more the old self resists. It whispers that choosing yourself is arrogance, that independence is isolation, that self-trust is pride. These are the voices of conditioning, the internalized guardians of obedience. Their purpose was once protection, now they are interference. They echo ancestral fears of exile, collective memories of punishment for authenticity. Each doubt that arises is an invitation to reaffirm allegiance, not to comfort but to truth. The system will call your freedom rebellion until it remembers it as remembrance. You begin to see that every external loyalty was a mirror of inner fragmentation. The people you idolized represented the power you denied. The ones you feared mirrored the authority you abandoned. Every relationship was a negotiation between your forgotten selves. As you reclaim these projections, the need for hierarchy dissolves. You stop bowing to reflections and start listening to resonance. The teachers, lovers, and mentors remain, but their authority transforms into equality. The energy exchange becomes vertical no more, only circular. This shift changes the architecture of desire. You no longer crave validation because you no longer feel separate from source. Attention from others, once currency, now feels like static noise unless it aligns with your field. You no longer confuse being seen with being known. Visibility loses its intoxication when authenticity becomes your atmosphere. The applause fades, but peace remains. The reward is no longer recognition. It is radiance. You do not need to be understood when you are transparent. Such sovereignty alters how energy moves through your body. Where you once leaked through worry, guilt, or explanation, you now circulate through clarity. Each breath returns power to center. The heart no longer accelerates to anticipate rejection. It beats steadily within its own field. You feel less urgency to respond, explain, or justify, not from apathy, but from sufficiency. The nervous system, once outsourced to others, moods, learns self-regulation as devotion. Presence becomes prayer. Relationships begin to reconfigure themselves around this new gravity. Some dissolve naturally, not from conflict, but from mismatch. Others deepen, drawn by the coherence of your frequency. You notice how people react differently to truth, depending on whether they are ready to hear their own. The ones who mistake your boundaries for distance reveal where they were attached to your compliance. Those who meet you in honesty mirror your evolution. When loyalty reverses, love refines. You may experience stretches of solitude in this phase, but solitude here is not isolation. It is calibration. It is awareness resetting its resonance before re-entering exchange. The silence between connections becomes fertile, the space where your signal strengthens. This is the preparation for higher communion, relationships that operate beyond need, beyond projection, beyond the unconscious contracts of comfort. And so the body, mind, and field begin to operate as one axis. Energy no longer spills outward searching for belonging. It radiates outward from belonging. You no longer orbit others. They orbit your authenticity. The gravitational pull of self-trust becomes your new atmosphere. You have not left love. You have purified it. Loyalty, once a leash, has become a lighthouse. When loyalty finally returns to its origin, peace becomes your default frequency. The energy that once chased, defended, or proved now simply emanates. There is no longer a battle between authenticity and acceptance, because you no longer negotiate your truth for belonging. The world adjusts to your coherence, not the other way around. This is the quiet authority of alignment. No dominance, no demand, only the gravitational certainty of presence. The highest power is the refusal to abandon yourself. The nervous system, once fragmented by external dependency, now beats in rhythm with awareness itself. You can feel the pulse of sovereignty, slow, steady, grounded. The highs of approval and the lows of rejection dissolve into neutrality. Attention feels lighter, praise quieter, criticism weightless. Your energy no longer reacts, it reflects. This is emotional maturity in its purest form, the capacity to hold love and truth simultaneously without collapsing into either. With this stability comes the return of intuition. When the noise of seeking fades, the signal of knowing amplifies. You begin to sense direction without analysis, to feel alignment before decision. Guidance arises from silence, not strategy. The mind once obsessed with outcomes becomes a servant to resonance. You trust that what is yours will stay because you no longer cling to what must go. This is divine self-loyalty, not control, but communion with design. You do not chase destiny. You allow coherence to find its own reflection. The external world begins to mirror this internal loyalty. Opportunities align without effort. Relationships harmonize without adjustment. What you used to force now flows. The frequency of authenticity acts as magnetism. The field recognizes itself and rearranges accordingly. You start attracting experiences that match your energetic integrity, not because you manifested them, but because you stopped betraying yourself. The universe does not reward loyalty, it resonates with it. Freedom from old loyalties also brings unexpected grief. There is a softness that comes with no longer needing to perform. The self that once hustled for love, begged for validation, and feared rejection dissolves quietly, like smoke leaving a body. You may feel sadness for that version of you, not because you miss it, but because you finally understand it. Compassion replaces shame. You bow to the exhausted parts that carried you here and release them into rest. You do not destroy the old self. You liberate it through understanding. Soon, even the idea of loyalty transforms. It ceases to be an act of allegiance and becomes a state of coherence. To be loyal is simply to be clear, to remain aligned with truth regardless of circumstance. You no longer serve anything external, not even ideals. You serve resonance itself, that living intelligence vibrating beneath all form. Integrity replaces effort. Simplicity becomes sacred. Every decision, every silence, every gesture hums with the same frequency: remembrance. Thus, the eighth archive completes as coronation. The throne was never outside you, it was the awareness reclaiming its own seat within. You stand unguarded, yet invulnerable, not armored, but illuminated. Relationships, work, creation, all orbit the same nucleus, self-harmony. The reversal is complete. The energy once scattered through seeking now radiates through sovereignty. You have not become loyal to yourself. You have remembered that you always were. Archive 9. Love without pain. When the memory of suffering fades, love reveals its original form, silence in motion. It is not the rush, nor the ache, nor the gravity that once pulled two wounds together. It is the current that remains when all emotional noise has been cleared. Love without pain is not detached, it is lucid. It does not demand, compare, or complete. It simply recognizes itself wherever awareness meets awareness. Love was never meant to burn, it was meant to illuminate. The absence of pain can feel disorienting at first. The nervous system, once conditioned to associate affection with anxiety, searches for the tension it equated with meaning. Calm feels foreign, peace feels empty. But this emptiness is not lack, it is capacity. It is space unoccupied by fear, room for resonance to exist without distortion. The body must relearn what safety feels like, for it has been mistaking survival for passion. The stillness that once felt lifeless now becomes sacred ground. This transformation is not the death of emotion, but its refinement. Joy loses its manic edge, desire loses its desperation. Everything becomes quieter, yet infinitely more precise. You can feel more because you cling less. You can give without calculating, receive without grasping. The energy once spent performing love now powers presence. In this neutrality, affection becomes clarity, a mirror with no agenda. Peace does not mean the absence of feeling, it is the absence of distortion within it. Love without pain is not dramatic, it is devotional. It moves slowly, deliberately, like a pulse remembering eternity. There are no highs to chase, no tests to pass, no illusions to defend. Connection becomes communion, two fields overlapping in mutual recognition. You no longer fall in love, you rise into it. The excitement once mistaken for depth is replaced by stillness that feels infinite. The body no longer trembles, it resonates. In this state, forgiveness becomes obsolete because nothing needs to be forgiven. You understand that pain was never caused by others, only revealed through them. The drama of victim and villain dissolves, leaving only understanding. Compassion becomes effortless, not as tolerance but as perception. You see that everyone, at every stage of consciousness, was seeking love in the only way they could feel it. You stop forgiving when you realize there was never anything to forgive, only to understand. The boundaries between giving and receiving blur. Love flows as energy, not exchange. You no longer seek to hold it because it cannot be possessed. It moves through you like breath, asking for nothing but recognition. This is the difference between attachment and affection. One clings, the other circulates. The more you release it, the stronger it becomes. What once felt fragile now feels indestructible because it no longer depends on outcome. Thus, the ninth archive opens with the revelation that love and pain were never twins, only temporary companions. Pain was the initiation. Love is the inheritance. When the wound closes, what remains is awareness unguarded. You do not protect your heart anymore. You live through it. Love without pain is not the end of emotion. It is the beginning of consciousness as warmth. The deeper this love anchors, the more the old paradigms dissolve. You no longer chase connection because you no longer believe in distance. The same awareness that lives behind your eyes lives behind all eyes. Love becomes recognition, not pursuit. When you look at another, you are not seeing an object of desire or reflection of lack. You are witnessing the same consciousness wearing a different rhythm. You never loved another, you only remembered yourself through them. In this state, intimacy transcends narrative. There are no more roles to play, no more lessons to reenact. Every interaction unfolds without script or expectation. You do not perform kindness to prove purity. You do not withhold to preserve control. You simply allow energy to move as it wishes. Love becomes the natural language of coherence. The heart no longer negotiates. It translates silence into gesture, awareness into presence, unity into expression. What once felt like vulnerability now feels like strength. Openness no longer risks hurt because there is nothing left to defend. You have seen through the illusion that protection prevents pain. It only prevents depth. The absence of armor does not invite harm. It invites truth. In transparency, love becomes self-sustaining, immune to rejection, beyond abandonment. You cannot be hurt by love, only by resistance to it. The nervous system mirrors this clarity. Its rhythm, once erratic with emotional survival, synchronizes to the pulse of presence. You breathe slower, listen longer, respond later. Stillness replaces urgency. You no longer scan for threat or validation because you no longer outsource regulation to others. The chemistry of anxiety, once mistaken for attraction, fades. What remains is simplicity, the quiet certainty that nothing real can be lost. This simplicity also dissolves the mythology of the one. There is no single source of fulfillment because love is no longer exclusive. It is elemental, You do not seek to possess the ocean when you have remembered that you are water. People come and go, but the current remains constant. You experience relationships as waves, distinct yet indivisible from the same sea. The need for permanence is replaced by reverence for presence. Eternal love is not duration, it is depth without attachment to time. Through this perception, heartbreak transforms into gratitude. You can look back on every connection, every fracture, and feel only completion. The pain that once defined memory now feels like texture, necessary contrast that made recognition possible. The loop was never punishment, it was preparation. Each repetition trained awareness to feel without falling, to love without losing. Now, even loss feels like love expressing itself as release. And so, the heart becomes transparent, not empty, but unbound. It beats not for possession, but for participation in the pulse of existence. You love because to exist is to radiate. You love because awareness, left unexpressed, becomes silence, too dense to hold. Love without pain is not what you give or receive. It is what you are when nothing distorts your frequency. You were never meant to find love. You were meant to remember that you are its field. As this awareness stabilizes, emotion transforms into light, not metaphorical but energetic. Every feeling that once fractured into extremes now resolves into coherence. You sense love as vibration rather than sentiment, as a soft radiance moving through form. It has no direction, no object, no beginning or end. It simply circulates, connecting all things through recognition. This is what mystics called divine union, not merging with another, but dissolving the illusion of another entirely. Love without pain is awareness realizing there was never two. In this unity, even memory changes tone. The moments once charged with longing now shimmer with neutrality. You do not erase them, you redeem them. Every person who entered your life still exists as frequency within your field, refined, harmonious, complete. Nothing is missing, nothing unresolved. The loops that once tethered you to the past now act as harmonics, expanding your resonance rather than binding it. The architecture of pain becomes the cathedral of peace. Communication itself becomes different. You no longer speak to be understood. You speak to vibrate. Words emerge slower, soaked in awareness. Listening feels like meditation. Silence like communion. Every interaction carries the weightless gravity of sacred exchange. You no longer perform empathy. You are empathy. Compassion flows not as emotion but as equilibrium. To love is simply to remain undisturbed while allowing everything to exist. Love does not fix. It witnesses until distortion forgets itself. As the personal dissolves, creation becomes the new expression of intimacy. Art, movement, breath, all become extensions of love's field. You no longer create to be seen, but because being itself wishes to unfold through you. Inspiration feels less like ambition and more like remembrance. You are no longer channeling something greater. You are what was always being channeled. The artist, the lover, the mystic, all one gesture of awareness describing itself in motion. Eventually you recognize that even love is a word too small for what remains. It was language's attempt to describe coherence. What you once called love was the shimmer of unity through the density of separation. Now, as separation dissolves, language collapses. Silence becomes sufficient. You feel what cannot be spoken. The pulse of existence recognizing itself across infinite mirrors. When the word love disappears, its truth finally becomes audible. The nervous system attunes to this silence like a tuning fork in the hands of God. Every breath becomes equilibrium, every heartbeat a mantra of belonging. You walk through the world untouched yet deeply connected, a presence so gentle it bends reality toward harmony. Conflict loses anchor because there is no resistance left to sustain polarity. You have not escaped the world. You have dissolved the illusion that you are separate from it. Thus, the ninth archive concludes as ascension. Love without pain is not an achievement. It is a homecoming. What you mistook for enlightenment was simply your natural state remembered. There is no arrival, no end, only unfolding awareness radiating as quiet warmth. The loop has completed not by closing, but by becoming transparent. You do not love anymore. You are what love becomes when it stops trying to prove itself. Epilogue. The end of the loop. There is a silence that follows revelation, not the silence of absence, but of completion. It is the sound of energy returning to stillness, of memory ceasing to orbit identity. You sit within it, no longer seeking, no longer decoding, only breathing. Every archive that spoke through you has dissolved into this one breath. You realize that what you called healing was remembering. What you called pain was initiation. The system no longer loops because there is nothing left to repeat. When understanding replaces emotion, the loop ends by itself. You look back, but there is no weight. Every story that once felt sharp now glows softly, its edges rounded by awareness. The faces, the triggers, the longing, all appear like fragments of a dream you have finally awakened from. There is tenderness toward the character you once played, gratitude toward every mirror that shaped your remembering. You understand now that suffering was not punishment but pressure, the sculpting force that carved silence into shape. The mind, having fulfilled its purpose, grows quiet. It no longer analyzes, it observes. Thought becomes texture rather than cage. Emotion becomes current rather than command. You can feel consciousness breathing through the body, not as a tenant, but as owner. The nervous system hums in sync with awareness, a perfect circuitry of neutrality and flow. This is what freedom feels like. Nothing to prove, nothing to resist, nothing to fix. Liberation is not escape, it is ownership of presence. As awareness stabilizes, reality itself softens. The world, once dense with meaning and struggle, feels transparent. You no longer walk through it, it moves through you. Every sound, every color, every face is a reflection of the same intelligence that beats your heart. Duality remains, but without division. You can sense both stillness and motion, both silence and sound, existing as one phenomenon. This is not philosophy. It is perception unfiltered by fear. The love that remains is impersonal yet intimate, vast yet immediate. It requires nothing because it already includes everything. You recognize yourself in strangers, in wind, in quiet rooms. Connection becomes continuous, no longer dependent on proximity. You can feel the pulse of existence. The same pulse that once triggered anxiety now radiates as coherence. You are not the observer anymore. You are the awareness through which observation occurs. You are never broken, only dreaming of separation. And as the dream fades, so does the need for interpretation. There are no more archives to uncover, no hidden codes left to decipher. What began as forbidden psychology ends as sacred simplicity. The forbidden was never truth itself, only the forgetting of it. Now memory and identity, mind and matter, pain and peace all converge into one frequency, silence. It is not empty. It is full, full of everything that was ever fragmented returning to itself. So you close your eyes, not to retreat, but to remember. The loop dissolves into the field that never moved. Awareness breathes in its own rhythm, and in that breath you hear it. The hum that has always been beneath thought, beneath emotion, beneath history. It whispers the truth you spent lifetimes decoding. You were never searching for love. You were love, searching for a mirror. And memory has now been seen. Which emotion have you mistaken for love? Comment what pattern you now see with new eyes.